Real podcast. I'm Elle.
I'm Camille.
Today, we decided to take a break from having such wonderful interviews with people and talk about a subject that we get frequently asked about. So today, we wanted to discuss signs with everybody.
Yeah. Like, why do we get signs from the other side? What is a sign? And we're going to share some really cool stories. So,
Yeah, I think it is one of the number one ways people generally feel like they interact with their loved ones. So it's kind of a big thing. It's a big topic to discuss. A lot of people are somewhat familiar with it, but maybe don't recognize the wide variety of ways spirits interact with us here. I mean, it's one of the first things that you learned about Camille. You wrote a whole chapter in your book about it, right?
yeah, it's a baby chapter, but it's a theme. It's definitely a theme in my relationship with my son, Wes, on the other side. Like, he's really good at sending signs.
Would you say it was one of the first things that you noticed? I mean, I know you had a really close connection with him after he passed, but was it one of the earlier on things
hmm
that you'd get with him?
Yeah, I started experiencing random hearts showing up, like a rubber band would fall on the floor in the shape of a heart, or just like there'd be really, really random ones, but creative ones too. I was like, "Ooh, that's a good one, Wes. Good job." I just knew. I'm like, "This is what he's doing. He's sending me hearts to let me know he loves me." Like I just kind of,
Yeah.
without even really studying up on this is something spirits do when they pass, they send you signs. I wasn't really aware of that. I wasn't as like in this world.
Yeah. I was just gonna ask, like, how did you know they were from him? It was just some kind of like innate kind of intuitive knowledge. You're just like, oh, it made you think of him, right? It made you think of him.
Well, it did. And people would ask me, like, what signs does he send you? And I was like, I don't know. I just feel him around a lot. Like, sometimes I can sense what he's saying to me. But then I started picking up on the hearts.
Yeah.
So,
And you made a connection.
yeah.
So that is like, as far as why they do it, that is like the number one reason because it's obvious, because it attracts attention. And they want to communicate, they want to be noticed, they want to be acknowledged because they know oftentimes that passing leaves a hole, even if it's time, even if it is something that, is almost a relief because of, disease or age or illness or something, it leaves a hole and they want to kind of heal that and help us out and let them know that they love us and they're aware of us and they're still okay from the other side. So,
Yeah. I think it's kind of the most efficient way for them, the easiest way for them to communicate.
right,
Not everyone knows how to like sense or pick up on this person feels like they're around me right now, or I'm definitely getting thoughts that they're sending me. That's a more obvious, like easy way. I'm gonna send a heart in the shape of a cloud, a cloud shaped heart, and
or
I'm gonna,
rock,
yeah. And it doesn't require a lot of like know-how on connecting to the other side to just notice that a rock in front of you as you're hiking is shaped like a heart.
right. I think that's a really good point. That most people are just kind of unaware of like the sensation of feeling the other side, though you will always hear me say that I think everybody has the capacity to some degree. But it's not like everybody walks around with it on all the time. And also in conjunction with that, it takes the least amount of effort from the spirit world as well. Like the least amount of energy most of the time for many signs, to do something like that, to let their presence be known. So they're they're all about efficiency, efficient use of energy, right? So yeah, it's much easier for them to convey that to your average person than it is to try to show up in a visitation dream or speak to them. A lot of the times it's much more simple, to have a set pattern of communication for them to be realized and recognized.
Yeah. So breaking it down to the most common signs. I have a list of like 15. But I think one of the common things that we were talking before we started recording, and I was like, birds. And she's like, well, anything with wings. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's an interesting, I never picked up on like the ladybugs have wings, the butterflies, the birds,
Right.
dragonflies,
Yeah, flying things.
like
um
majestic things, not like the house flies, not really a sign, at least not for me.
I've never heard someone claim houseflies.
No.
Yeah. And I think we also have like a cultural sense for things with wings. You know, something about the freedom, something about the ethereal, spirit-like nature of having wings. And usually those things are graceful and beautiful and like unbounded and things like that. And a lot of different cultures, just kind of like back that up symbolically with meaning. So it makes a lot of sense for spirits to be able to use that to communicate with us or to represent themselves. But birds are definitely a big one, and it can be any bird, but there are specific birds that do tend to be more related to spirits. Cardinals are a huge one. Blue jays are another huge one. Sometimes things like ravens or
Mm-hmm.
crows. Hawks, eagles are another really big one. And a lot of that goes back to like Native American lore as well.
Yeah.
They, the eagle, the hawk is a spirit bird. So is the blue jay. It represents the spirit world to a lot of cultures, even those of us from more of a European descent. We have cardinals, for instance. It represents the spirit world. Like there's a house where I lived before in Pennsylvania. The mailbox next door, the couple next door, they were an older couple. They had one of those mailbox covers and it had cardinals on it. And underneath it said, Heaven sends you a message.
Oh, that's
I
so
was like,
cute.
that's perfect.
Okay, I have to tell you a really quick story. You were talking about eagles, and this isn't necessarily a message from like a deceased loved one, but it just kind of felt like a message from God. So back in September, I was a speaker for this like digital Christian based Facebook page where they have like an uplifting message every day. And I was the speaker when it's like a 5 to 10 minute thing, really quick. And I didn't know exactly what I was going to talk about, but I had an idea. So then earlier that day, I went on a little bike ride with my son. He was only 4, and it's still like really warm, in California in September. And we're on dirt. We're going up this hill, and I see a snake, and I was like, okay, there's snakes here. It's fine. Um, and I've never seen a scary snake in real life. I've seen like garter snakes or
Rattlesnakes? You haven't seen rattlesnakes in California or Utah?
never. And I hike.
Really?
I've never seen one. So I get closer and I'm like, oh, okay. What kind of snake is that? Is it a rattlesnake? And I get closer and it's a long, probably like a 3 to 4 foot snake. And I'm like, there's a rattle on the back of it. Oh, like this is happening. And I didn't notice the rattle until we got pretty close to it. And I didn't want to
You didn't hear
startle
it?
it. No, it wasn't shaking. No, it's just sitting there, just like laying on the dirt road in the sun. And I was like, I don't want to
Yeah,
startle it. So I got off the bike and we kind of slowly walked around, like on the other side of the bike. I didn't want to like have it like, try to bite my
strike.
son on the back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and then we just walked up the hill and then we waited for like 5 minutes and then we walked back down and it was gone. We got back on the bike and we left.
Uh-huh.
That was really scary for me because my little boy is like, he's the baby that I had after Wesley died. He's like
Yeah.
my rainbow child. Like my
They're highly venomous snakes too.
I know. So,
So.
and he's 4. He's a little boy. So we're going back down the hill, and then as we get down to the bottom of the hill, back to like the road, like the pavement, I see this huge, and I've never seen one close up like this, golden eagle just sitting on like this fence. And I'm like, that's crazy. That's like a nature show all in like 10 minutes, you know?
Hmm.
And it was just sitting there and then it flew away and it's this huge wingspan. It's very majestic. And so I go home and I'm like, what is the significance of a snake and an eagle? Like, what would the Native Americans say? Like, what is the symbolism here? And the snake represents like the evil or the scary things in the world. And the golden eagle represents like God and the noble things. And so my message that I gave that night was, I think back and that was the beginning of the war in the Middle East, I believe, back in September. Is that something was going on that was stressful in the world where I was like some news story. And it was just like, there's scary stuff going on. But like the golden eagle is the last thing I saw and like good prevails. So there's definitely
Yeah.
symbolism in nature. I feel like that wasn't a specific sign from a loved one. It was just kind of like God giving this message of hope.
Right. I think it highlights an interesting point of like whenever you point out nature behavior that's unusual, like it
Yeah.
attracts our attention. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, why did they behave that way? Like my my bird story is a bit similar of a sign. So I had my cat, his name was Monster, and he was like my spirit animal. Like I've had this cat for 15 years, and he was the most devious but intelligent cat. He was clinically insane. He was mad. He was not right in the head, but he was an evil genius, like Pinky in the Brain type evil genius. Um, and he was a cat. I think I've referenced him before. Like I grew up with this cat. He when I was a teenager and having all these scary experiences with spirit from the, the less positive side, he was the thing that would like come in my room at night and make them
Mm,
leave and protect me. We were very, very close. And he passed in 2020. So he had a long life, but it was a very hard end of life. He kind of wasted away, and it was, death is not graceful. Even for pets, it can be a hard experience to pass through, and we were very close. So, um, we went and I made the decision to not let him, um, you know, suffer to death because he wasn't eating, he wasn't drinking. He would have, starved and died from dehydration. Cats dehydrate really quickly.
yeah.
And so I couldn't even take him in. My husband had to do it. And when he came back from the vet without Monster, like I just broke down. I was very upset. And my husband hates animals. He does not do. This cat came into our marriage by default because he was like that nuptial agreement, the prenuptial agreement. And we sat on the couch and he did his best to comfort me. Um, and I had this beautiful experience of um, seeing him. Like I had a vision experience of just suddenly that came over me of seeing him walk across a field. And our other family pet from my childhood was a miniature Doberman, and she walked close and they touched noses, and then
Oh,
they both turned and there was a woman in white who bent over and picked Monster up and then crossed this field with him. And it was kind of left me with that very peaceful feeling of um like he's made it. He's at peace. He's at rest. And he's at a good place. He has someone who loves him, who's taking care of him on the other side. And that vision kind of closed, it ended, and it was like, whoa. And that moment I looked up, and sitting outside of the window directly in front of me, there was a blue jay. We have like an awning on the roof that kind of came out that window, and he was sitting there. And I had never seen a blue jay in this area before. I knew that they were indigenous to where we lived, but I'd never seen, we lived there for like 5 years and I'd never seen one. And up until that point with birds, I'm the skeptic. I'm like, birds are doing bird stuff outside. Like
yeah.
they're just around doing stuff, right? How can that be a sign? But that blue jay hopped from the porch to our windowsill directly in front of me and made eye contact with me for like a full 30 seconds. He just stared at me through that window. And we were not sitting far back from the window. I'm like, birds don't
Hmm.
don't get that close. He knew we were there. And stared at me for a full 30 seconds directly. And then he flew away. And I was like, I had this overwhelming sense of like, that was from Monster for me. He sent a bird because
Yeah.
he's an evil genius of irony, to let me know that was a confirmation of what I had just experienced with him. And I knew it without a doubt. Um, After that, I was a little more of a believer in bird science.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, people will say, well, we see birds all the time. I've been getting lately, um, the crow, and it'll be where I'm walking or I'm driving, and all of a sudden there's this crow that just flies like diagonally up, like it's like taking flight in front of me, really close
Hmm.
to like either my head or my car, and I'm like, oh, there's another one. And it happens like every single day. Whereas I just started noticing it within like the last 3 months. So this is an
Yeah.
interesting sign. Like, what is this all about? And I was just reading, I'm like, what does the crow represent? It just represents the spirit world. I'm like,
Hmm.
working on my connection, and I've been the crow just like every single day. I'm like, it's weird. I was on a walk with a friend and I was telling her about it, and then it happened. I'm like, see, that's the one I'm talking about.
I think that's another good point to focus on is repetitive
Repetitive.
experiences.
Yeah.
When you get something that might be slightly out of the ordinary or something that draws your attention in the same way happening within a pattern, it can also be indicative of a sign.
Right. And
So
like, and
there
also
are
it's
things that set them aside, right? Not every bird is a sign.
no,
but-
no, it's not. And people can say, well, you're just looking for a sign. But I started noticing, I'm like, why is this happening every day? Like, what does
Right.
this mean? And it's funny because I went to like in my faith background, the temple's a really spiritual place. So I'm walking in to the temple and I noticed this crow does that diagonal flying thing um, above my head. And then he perches on the roof, the outside, just kind of stares at me. And I'm like, oh, it's happening again.
And he's here now.
Yeah, I'm like, okay. Sign noted, noted. It's just uncanny.
Yeah.
Like, why are these crows flying like right in front of me and then just staring at me? It's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little um unusual is a good word for it.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a good thing. I used
uh,
to be terrified. Ever since I saw the movie The Birds, and I always thought black crows were like so scary. I've got over that. So
good.
yeah.
Um, another connection with animals too, I think, because animals are just generally a lot more aware of the spirit world than we are. And so oftentimes they'll notice when they're around maybe sooner than we will. Especially because we're distracted, we're doing other things, and my dog's just sitting around. So and for instance, Monster, my cat, he was like my talisman of the spirit world. Whenever anything was in the room, he would always he would just like watch the corner and you knew he was staring at something intently. Like cats get like that hunting gaze,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
When they're like intent on something, he would just watch the corner. I'd be like, who's over there? He would just watch. I'm like, something's over there. The dogs do it too. Like they'll notice something in the room and they'll perk up and they'll like shift their attention around and follow it. So pets can be a really great indicator of spirit presence as well.
Yeah, or like let's say a dog had a special relationship with an owner who passed on and the spouse of that owner like the dog does a certain thing when that person, shows up, comes home and the dog
Right.
is doing that behavior when she can't see. My husband, I don't know if I can't say my husband here, but the dog's acting like he's here. So
Yeah.
that's another sign
Yeah,
too.
that'd be a really obvious one.
Yeah.
But there are also like remnants of those animals. Like another really common sign people will find is feathers.
Hmm.
Like feathers in random places where they shouldn't be, like
Hmm.
inside your house.
Oh
Or
yeah.
like falling from the sky, right? That's another really common one. Or specific colors of feathers to represent. Like I have a friend who her sister always comes through as white feathers. She'll find them in the strangest of places, like in her shoe. Walking down the sidewalk in front of her, like just like directly in her path, or like going into buildings or something, she'll find a white feather in the middle of a walkway where she's walking or something.
Hmm.
So their feathers, anything kind of celestial or heavenly, is
Hmm.
frequently used by spirit as a sign.
Yeah, butterflies. After my son passed away, we were at this like lake and they're on the beach and just hanging out as a family. And there was this one monarch butterfly um that was just kind of lingering. It was just staying around. Like it literally was sitting next to my dad for like 30 minutes. And there's this butterfly. He's just been sitting here for like half an hour. And then when we left, the butterfly flew away. I'm like, yeah, it's just Wes saying he's here because we're having a family gathering. Like, of course he would want to be a part of it. So like he's sending the butterfly to let us know.
Right.
Yeah.
Dragonflies are another really common one people often experience. I've had so many sessions with people where they have had dragonflies. I mean, dragonflies are zippy. Oftentimes they do land on you. But um, a lot of times with signs, like how do you know that they're from that person? Like how do you know whether they're an actual sign or just, an interesting coincidence that's occurring? A lot of times you'll be reminded suddenly. That person will come to mind.
Hmm.
So I had one woman that I was having a session with, and she had lost her sister. And she went to her sister's headstone, and there was like it was one of those headstones that had a bench, like where her name was like carved into the back of the bench, and that's what the marker was. And she would often go sit on that headstone to connect with her sister and just, feel like they were still connected to each other. And a couple months after her sister had passed, it was like a beautiful summer day, and she went out there and she sat on this bench, and this brilliant, like, blue dragonfly came up and landed on her knee. And it sat there. She was almost like she didn't want to move because she didn't want to disturb this dragonfly. It sat there for like 10 minutes. And as it was sitting there, she felt the very strong inclination of her sister, like a very, very strong presence of her sister. And she knew that dragonfly was like representing her sister in that moment. And then every
Yeah.
moment after that, she knew whenever it was particular, it was like a blue jewel dragonfly. And she's like, whenever I see that dragonfly, I know my sister is here. Like I'm thinking of my sister.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times it will be different. It'll be set aside because you'll have an experience where you'll see something and it'll make you think of that person. Like your hearts with Wes, you were like, what signs? And you notice a pattern of things that
Hmm.
occur. And then you notice that they come to mind when you see that.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people have a lot of doubt because they think, like, it's the most strange thing in the world. Why would they be sending me this? Like, what proof do I have that they're sending me this? Right. But I think when you get enough of something and it just keeps reoccurring and you keep having that sentimental feeling, that feeling of connection, um, it it's proof enough. Like, just take it for what it is and appreciate it.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's huge though. If you actually express gratitude, when I say thanks, Wes, for sending me a heart today, I just noticed that versus when I just like, oh, there's another one. I feel like I get more of them when I express appreciation.
right. And it's interesting to see an uptake when that happens.
Yes, because
You
it's kind of
know?
like we're interacting more. I'm like saying thanks, Wes, and he's like, well, I'll send you more. It's like you do something nice for somebody and they don't say thanks. It's kind of like, well, that's not very fun.
Right. And it doesn't hurt anything to exercise a little bit of belief. If you find it comforting, then let it comfort you, right? Let it be what it is.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Okay, so my friends had a baby that passed pretty far along in her pregnancy, and so they buried the baby. And so they went to go visit her grave on her death anniversary just a few weeks ago, and they put a little like on the headstone they put a hummingbird because she'd
mm,
had an experience with hummingbirds that made her think of her
yeah,
daughter. So she's like,
it's
this is
another
our
really
sign.
common sign.
Yeah, so she's there on the death anniversary, and this hummingbird flies right up to him and just hovers right next to the grave while they're putting flowers on it twice. And she told me the story. And then the next day, I was sitting in my car and I was doing something on my phone. Like, when you get home and you're in your driveway and you're like, I'm not going in yet. My kids are in there. I'm going to hang out for
I'm
a
going to
bit.
avoid my children
I
and
know.
finish what I was doing in peace.
Sorry. So anyway, I'm sitting there and I feel the spirit say, look up. And so I look up and I see this hummingbird flying right next to my car. There's these flowers that have been growing and it's like, eating or drinking from the flower. And I've never seen a hummingbird. We've lived in this house for like 10 months and I've never seen a hummingbird on the property. So I told her about it. And then she came over like a month later and we're sitting in my backyard talking. And these three hummingbirds were just flying around. Like it was really cool. And I hadn't seen hummingbirds. Like they're attracted to my friend. They show up for her.
Right.
Yeah.
And you just, let it be. Roll with that if that is what brings you comfort.
Yeah.
Um,
Other common ones are we talked about coins. Did we talk about coins?
Yeah, we haven't yet. Coins are a really, really common one that people will find. And I think that that is a symbolism for us. I mean, there is a whole um, culture around coins, leaving coins at grave
Mm,
sites. There's a tradition in the military. I forget what it is, but it's like for so many years of service, you leave a certain coin or something on a headstone for the military. But often people will do that as like a memorial or a sign of respect for their deceased loved ones. Is they'll leave coins, and so it's really funny that they leave coins back for us, like all the time.
yeah. Well, and it's like it's cool because my cat unfortunately passed away this last August. And I walked outside, I think to go check the mail the morning we found out the cat, a neighbor said that he saw the coyote get it on his webcam. It was really sad. So I walk outside and there's this big magnet sitting on the sidewalk in front of my house. That's a coin magnet. Like I think it's like a 50-cent coin, which I don't even know when those were a thing. But it's just randomly sitting there. And I was like, this is for me. And so I picked it up and I take it inside. I'm like, it's from my cat, you know? So random. So random. It was just sitting there. And we also get coins just randomly around the house. We don't use cash hardly ever. We're just kind of credit card people, or debit card people. And coins will show up. And I always assimilate them to my husband's grandpa because my husband got all these like coins from his grandpa, like these dollar coins. And so if I see
Hmm.
random dimes or pennies, I'm like, oh, he's just saying hi. Letting
That
us
is
know
an
he's been
interesting
around.
association. I feel like a lot of time coin signs do tend to come from an older generation of people, in my
Oh, that's
experience.
a
I
good
don't know if
point
that,
because
this is my theory. Like, I don't know if
and
that's like not a hard
cats.
and fast rule, but, and cats, maybe cats too.
Because
So
he's an
coins
old
are a really
soul. He
common
was an
one.
old soul of a cat, so that would make sense.
Right. So
Yeah.
he belonged to that older
Yeah.
generational mindset. He was like a boomer cat.
Totally. Yeah.
Um, Another super common one that we kind of touched on is hearts. Um, Obviously that's a sign for you. I know numerous people that get hearts from, especially from close loved ones, a lot of times, and they can take all kinds of shapes. Like I have a friend who gets hearts from her mother and collects rocks. Like she has so many heart rocks, and like how many of these rocks could possibly be around where you live? She'll just go
Hmm.
on a walk and she'll find one, and it's like a legitimately heart-shaped rock. I'm like, this isn't a naturally occurring shape in nature.
Hmm.
So, but people find them in the most strange of places. Like, I have another friend who had heart surgery and they had to go, there was something about the blood vessels in her heart were like not operating correctly and they had to go cauterize some of them. And when they went in there, with the tiny, laparoscopic camera, um, they took a picture of how the vessels were formed in her heart, and they were in the shape of a heart.
And
And
that's a
the
sign she
surgeon,
got from the other side.
yeah, and the surgeon afterwards, like after she came out of the surgery, he was like, I've never in my life seen this. This is so bizarre, but I feel like you really need to have this. And she took it as a sign of like she got immense peace from it. Like heaven was watching her and that it was all going to be okay. And she was. She was completely fine after this
Yeah.
somewhat perilous surgery. So
Yeah.
just like in the most bizarre places, in the clouds, rubber bands on the floor,
Hmm.
food in your animal's dish, food left on your plate after a meal, like
Hmm.
um hearts are a really common sign that show up in a lot of places.
Yeah. And I think sometimes the heart already existed, but it's just our eyes are drawn to like the spirit's like, oh, look, I want to show you this heart that happens to be here. Like it's a shape in the tile or something. Or we had a random crack in our tile I noticed last year. It was a new one. I'm like, ooh, what happened here? And it's in the shape of a heart. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's cute. Or my most creative heart that I ever got. I've mentioned this in my book. So Wesley's birthday is June 23rd. So I woke up the morning of the 24th and I'd been eating a banana the night before and I set it like the peel on my nightstand and I threw it away in the morning. And like the little I forgot the term, but like the piece parts of the banana that you don't eat, the like what's it called?
Yeah. Those little
Strippy things.
starchy
Yeah, the
strip
starchy
parts.
things. Okay, there's a
Yeah.
name for it, and I don't remember what they're called. Anyway, there was a little tiny piece, I guess, that had was sitting on my desk. But when I woke up in the morning, it was the shape of a heart, but it wasn't just like a piece. It was like smushed and like formed together. It was like compressed. And at
Hmm.
first, I was like, "What is this? Did Wesley just put something on my?" And I was like, "No, I had a banana." And I literally like licked it. I was like, "What does it taste like a banana?" And it kind of had that. And I was like, "Yes, this is from the banana." But it was a perfect heart and it was very compressed. It wasn't just like the regular, it had like more density to it. It was weird. I was like, thanks, that was the
Yeah.
best one. I That was the most creative heart I've ever gotten.
So people will often ask, those more skeptical of signs will ask like, well, how? Like, how does a sign happen? Like, how is somebody who's on the other side going to do something and interact in a way that I'm going to notice it? And I think you made a really important point where you said it's just directing your attention. So a lot of times they'll just kind of like point something out to your awareness, like See that cloud up there? It looks like my face.
Well,
Or,
some of them really
like,
do, though.
I've
I'm
had
in
that
this
happen.
Facebook
Yeah.
group, and people will post a picture of their child who's passed and a
Yeah.
picture of the cloud. I'm like, it's obvious. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
trying so hard. And sometimes people post other pictures where I'm like, I don't see anything. But
Yeah.
if it gives you peace, that's great. I don't say that, but I just let them go with it. But sometimes I'm like, that is uncanny. That is crazy.
Yeah. I've had that happen quite a few times in sessions. Or like natural fixtures. You have a story with a heart, I think, where you were driving back down a road that
Oh
you
my
take all the
gosh.
time, and there was a heart
Tons of
on the
times.
side of the cliff.
Well,
Yeah.
it's weird because, okay, actually, that's interesting you said that because I was driving that road in April. It's from California to St. George. As you're driving into the canyon, there's this black mountain and it has this
Hmm.
huge heart on it. But I have driven that road dozens of times in my life, living in California and Utah, back and forth. Um, Never seen it before, never noticed it before. And the moment, I don't know if I told you this part of the story, but the moment I was driving and looking at that heart, I was actually talking to Wes. And I was having a conversation with him about connecting with the other side and this journey I've been on and just having a conversation with him about it and saying, and we've talked about this on the podcast too, like, is it okay for me to use this gift? Should I be using this gift? This gift kind of found me. Is like this okay? And as I'm talking to Wesley about this, and I felt like it was important. So sometimes when I have an important conversation, I'm like processing or fleshing something out, I will record it on my phone just so I have it to like listen to later.
Hmm.
As kind of
That's
a
a good idea.
memory.
I should do
Well,
that.
and also because then after I process by hearing myself speak, right? Like, when
Hmm.
you're talking to a friend and you have a
Verbal
problem and
processing. That's what it
yeah.
is.
And then at the end, you're like, thanks for the idea. I have great ideas from you. And they're like, I said nothing. You just were talking to
Yeah.
yourself. Anyway, so I like to record it so then I can go back and listen to it and like kind of derive like, what wisdom I get from all of it and what I'm learning as I speak and listen. So I'm recording this conversation with Wesley, just kind of my side of it and talking to him. And then boom, I see this huge heart. And so I took a picture of it and I sent it to one of my friends. Um, and then my daughter is driving that road with this camp for church. So she's driving, I'm not with her this last week. And she sent me a picture of it. She was like, Mom, I saw this and I wanted to show it to you. It made me think of Wesley. And I was like, oh my gosh, she just noticed it for the first time too.
The same sign.
Yeah, the
That's
same sign
adorable.
within a couple of months. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And that is a great example of this, of like, they're just going to point your attention to something that's already there, but is going to be meaningful for you in that moment.
but here's the question though, is it always already there? Because that little banana in the shape of a heart, that's not really how the flesh of the banana
So
falls.
there are a whole slew of other signs that are something that do take a little bit more of like manipulation. So like moving things, like people, there, there are spirits who give signs of like taking stuff, like people's car keys, like moving it someplace it's not.
Yeah.
I a really common one I get is they'll show me that they like knock the pictures like in a hallway or
Yeah,
something.
they're
So all of them are
slanted
like
all the time.
a
Yeah.
little crooked all the way down. Or like pictures that sit on like your bedside table and they'll take them and they'll turn them or they'll flip them face down or something like that. Those kinds of things, which
Yeah.
requires some kind of physical manipulation, which
Mm-hmm.
they can do through the concentration, of energy.
Mm-hmm.
Other physical signs that happen are like lights flickering,
Yeah,
right? That's a really big
electrical
one.
stuff, technology stuff,
All
glitching.
electrical things. Electricity is really easy for another energy being to manipulate, right? It's just like put your finger in the wire and the energy flow stops and then the light flickers, right? So lights flickering, TVs turning on and off, radios turning on and off, like all kinds of spontaneous malfunctions of stuff like that should just perfectly work, but it's not working.
Yeah.
Um, that kind of thing occurring, it
Have you
can
ever
also
had
be a
that
sign.
happen to you? Have you seen anything move or any strange, like personally, that's not how Wesley interacts with us. He's not really that like kind of like I'm gonna do something
Playful.
mischievous. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, he's playful, but not in that way.
Yeah.
But I did a session with a lady, and she was asking me, "How does he send me signs?" Her husband had passed away, and he showed me like moving his kids like little toy cars across the floor. And so I asked him, like, "Does
Hmm.
he ever move toys?" She's like, "Yes, my son's little tiny cars." I'm like, "Okay, good. That's what he was telling me." Um, and she says he does it all the time because she just kind of, I think she kind of knew how he was sending signs, but she wanted to verify. It's always kind of interesting to have somebody else connect to your person, right? So she just wanted to like
Right.
get more evidence. Um, but I
It's
was like,
confirming, it's validation for you. You're like, oh, you're picking up on that too? I'm not crazy. Okay.
right.
Second
Yeah,
witness.
it is good. But I was just like, I can't really relate to that because I don't have any spirits that, besides, I feel like Jeff's grandpa, my husband's grandpa, puts coins in my path, right? And I
Hmm.
have had a time where I lost one of the pearl earrings I got from my grandma after she died. And I couldn't find it anywhere. And I was so upset. And I prayed, prayed, prayed that I would find it. And then in the morning I woke up, it was right next to where I was kneeling to pray. It was like on the floor.
Hmm.
And it was a bigger pearl. I wouldn't have missed it. It was like
Yeah.
obvious. But I don't really get stuff like that as far as like, oh, the spirit's like moving my window shades or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but it was funny because I kept in touch with that woman I gave a session to, and we were just chatting about things. And I noticed that that day, after I was chatting with her, I dropped my son off at tumbling, and then I heard a seatbelt click in my car. The exact same sound. You've heard it a million times. And
Hmm.
I'm all alone, and I'm like, I think he's giving me a sign that he's just like he wants to say hi, just like thanks for connecting to my family and
Right.
whatever, helping us out. And I heard that click, and I was like, so I messaged her really fast on Facebook. I'm like, guess what just happened? Like I never get these signs. It was the first time some like really
Yeah.
physical
Physical signs.
sound or movement, and I was just like, that's cool.
Yeah, it definitely takes more energy to do something like that. And so it's not necessarily as common, though there are some spirits that are much more energetic,
Mm-hmm.
like cupboard doors opening and closing, or
No, thank
like those
you.
kinds of things.
No, thank you.
Right. And sometimes we don't necessarily respond to it the best, and their intention usually isn't to scare us.
Right.
So, yeah, I've had instances with TVs that turn on and off by themselves with like no explanation or no reason why they should be turning on and off by themselves. Or toys, children's toys. And this one I asked them to stop because it was a little bit
A little
creepy. But
creepy.
like, could be like a short in the toy, right? But you take the battery out and it still does it, and you're like, okay, that's too much. So like,
Great show. I
um,
appreciate the effort. Thank you so much for showing me what you can do. But
I'm
let's
like,
let's
let's try this way instead. Thank
yeah.
you for letting me know that you're here, but 1 a.m. is not appropriate to just set off that toy.
Right, right.
Yeah. But sounds are another big one. Things that can be audible too. So like another huge one people will often get is like songs on the radio. Songs that
Mm-hmm.
was like, well, this was grandpa's wedding song or like his favorite song. Or they will often send lyrics that answer something that you're thinking about that you'll hear just suddenly. Like you'll have a problem that you're mulling over, right? There's something that is on your mind that you're thinking about, you're praying about that's heavy with you, and something will come on the radio or play on Alexa, and it's like
Yeah.
that answered well, that was exactly what I was thinking. Google's getting really good, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was reading a book about a near-death experience. This guy was in a coma, and his wife is she's worried about him that he's not going to make it, and she's sitting in her car and she's really thinking about him, and she felt him come into the car with her. So he's in a coma, he hasn't died, but his spirit's like traveling, right?
Hmm.
So she feels him sitting in the car with her, and this song comes on the radio. I think it was like 98 Degrees, that song, God Must Have Spent a Little More Time on You. And the message that she got was, God is just spending time with my husband. And she had a sense of peace. She didn't know if he was going to come back to the family or not, but he did end up coming back to the family. So that was something that was cool. Like it happened to her, and then that full circle where she got to have him back, and he had spent time with God. So
Right. And what a beautiful experience. And I think anytime you have something like that happen where you get an impression and it gives you peace, like we say with meaningful dreams, right? When it leaves you with something that you can take away from, this felt different, this felt meaningful, I got peace from this, I got a feeling from this. um just lean into that. There's no damage done by trusting something like that comes from a loved one, right? So um I would say like trust those things, trust those impressions that you have because they happen way more frequently than we give them credit for.
yeah.
So yeah. Another really fun physical sensations that happen with your body are a really good sign that spirit is around and that they're trying to talk to you, like goosebumps or
Mm.
chills,
Chills? Yeah.
is a really common indicator that something, like when there's no draft, the fan's not on, like something happens and it gives you chills. Often people will take that as a confirmation of whatever they're experiencing or feeling or thinking, suspecting is being confirmed. Like, yeah, when that song came on and I was like, oh, that reminds me of Grandpa. And then you get the chills. It's like, oh, it was
Mhm.
Grandpa.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Another physical sensation, I don't know if we've talked much about this on the podcast, but I was doing a session with a lady whose daughter was a pot smoker. Um, she died as a teenager. And I'm sitting here and all of a sudden I'm smelling pot.
Right.
And I'm like, nobody in my house smokes pot. We've lived here for 6 months plus, and none of my neighbors have ever smoked pot. So I'm pretty sure my windows are shut. So I'm
Right.
pretty sure that she's giving me this physical sign just to, and so of course I tell her mom, I'm like, Emily's sending me the smell of pot. She's just having like, I don't know, she wants to be playful or something. And it lasted for like 5 seconds and then it went away.
Yeah, that's a really common one too. People will smell things. When I had just gotten married, so my brother-in-law passed within the first year. Like we got married in February and he passed Christmas Eve. And that after the funeral, we went home and we would smell cigarette smoke all through the house.
I was gonna
And
ask
we
you what
live,
signs you got from him.
yeah, we get a lot of different ones from him.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's cologne, but at the time it was cigarette
Mm.
smoke, and I do believe it was because it was more obvious. He was a smoker,
Mhm.
and we lived in an area. We went to BYU. This is a campus that has an honor code. Part of that honor code is you have to live in approved housing, and that approved housing has rules, and one of those rules is that you're not smoking, you're not drinking,
Yeah, it's a
and
religious university.
right. There was approved housing on either side of us, and my parents owned this house in the middle. So there was no neighbors that would have been smoking. This house had always been in an area right next to campus where its owners had either rented it to students or owned it and gone to the school. So there was nothing in the walls, in the floorboards. Smoke is a smell. Smells really can be prevalent and stick in
Hmm.
drywall or in paint or in
Oh yeah,
furniture or in fabric, right?
paint even.
But
Yeah.
right, but there was no history of smoke for like 100 years. And and we would like smell it in a spot and then we'd like smell the stuff. We're like, is it in the wood floor? Is it in the wall? And we walk around and then it would move and it would be in this spot and then it would be in that spot. And I'm like,
And he thinks he's hilarious, and you're like,
it
oh.
totally does. Yeah. And so at this point, I wasn't developed enough to be able to have like a full-blown communication with him, but it got to the point where I recognized that he was there. I was like, okay, I feel you hanging
I know
out.
what you mean.
Like
Yeah.
I'm picking up what you're putting down. Like, yes, this is this is you. But it threw us off for quite some time. And sometimes it'd be upstairs and sometimes it'd be the basement where my brother and sister-in-law are like, is someone smoking outside? We're like, nope. That's Joe. So yeah, and then at the house we just moved from, I'd had several points of contact with the man who had passed in that house that we bought the house from his sons, and he would always show up smelling like barbecue. I wish I could have asked his sons if he did that, but he hung out in specific spots in the house, spots that have no connection to a barbecue or to smoke of any kind.
Maybe he was famous for his barbecued
Maybe
chicken
he
wings.
was. Maybe that's how he
Should have
always
asked him for
preferred
the
to eat his
recipe.
meat.
Maybe he wanted to give
Right.
it to you. Yeah.
Maybe he
Unfinished
did, and I
business.
missed out. Dang it. But yeah, he would show up with that scent. But other people frequently they'll smell cologne, they'll smell their grandma's perfume, right?
Hmm.
Um, so scents like that are often a very popular sign for spirit to use.
Yeah, my friend smells cigar smoke around like her grandpa sends her cigars.
Yeah.
So
Which is, and usually it's something that's really pungent, right? It's
yeah.
something that like sticks to you or sticks to your clothing. So yeah, that's a really good one. Um, Other common signs, I mean, we have to mention dreams. Um,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, dreams visitations. They're also big signs from people.
Okay, so I haven't had a dream with Wes in it for like 6 months plus, and I had one just like 3 or 4 nights ago. And it wasn't like he showed up and had this like message and we had this conversation. It was just we were at a family reunion, which interestingly enough, we have a family reunion later this month. Hmm. And it's he's playing with my dog, which my dog won't be at the family reunion, but it's just a symbolic dream. Like I'm going to be
Right.
around the family. He's playing with the dog, which is cute because we actually bought the dog right after he died as like an emotional, like we were sad and we just bought this puppy, you know? So he's playing with the dog and then later he's playing with cousins. And I'm just like, oh, that's so cool. He was just, those are some of my favorite dreams I get of Wesley is he's just hanging out with the family like good old times, normal. Like there's no real
Yeah.
message. There's not a like ton of depth. It's more just like, yeah, of course he's hanging out with us. He's
He's
part of the
just
family.
present.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oftentimes that is one of the biggest messages that they want to convey. And I think most people wonder, like, what are they doing? Where are they at? Like, are they aware of us? And it's the answer is yes. And oftentimes they want you to know that they are still present. They're very present in everything that we're doing and in our lives. We think that they're someplace else, but oftentimes it's a whisper away, right?
Yeah.
They're with us most of the time.
And it's important to note that these signs that we're getting are not like on necessarily just on their birthday or their death anniversary or something momentous. It's like I'm walking across my floor and I run into a dime and I'm like, I haven't used cash in 6 months. Where did this come from?
Yeah,
It's just the mundane. They're part of our mundane everyday life, just like they were when they were alive. They want to just say, I'm still here and I don't have to be around for anything, you know, really significant. I'm just here.
right. And I think if there's any doubt, I would not hesitate to ask, you
Hmm.
know, prove it. I've done that. Like, so I am the skeptic, and signs are one of those things for a long time. I was like, like coincidence.
Until the cigarette smoke was like stuck in your nose and you're like, please stop.
Stop, this is too much. Even then, though, it's really easy to talk yourself out of something. And it's really easy to justify it or find excuses or, reasons why that happened. And just because there's a reason why that happened doesn't mean it's not a sign, right? It doesn't mean that they didn't set that up or direct your attention to it or like
Right.
change some small course of action so that whatever that sign is would be there or would happen, right?
One more important thing we're going to mention before we wrap up is numbers. Ever since I was probably in seventh grade, I've been seeing 101. I don't know why. Like I look at the clock almost every day sometimes. I'm like, it's 101. Why do I do this? What does 101
Hmm.
even mean? I finally looked it up like a couple years ago and it means something like you're on your right path. And I'm okay.
Yeah.
Or like a
Usually ones have to
spiritual
do with that.
journey. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a
Yeah.
random number too. It's like a lot of people, my favorite number is eight, or I always see 101. Oh, and actually, the time I saw that number, we had a Dalmatian, and 101 Dalmatians is, so maybe that's it. I don't
Right.
know.
That
But
was directly connected. It was probably the movie.
I don't know. I'm just saying, I started noticing it, and I was around that age, and I'm like, why do I keep seeing this? And now, lots of
Right.
years later, it's still, it's important. I see that number all the time.
A lot
Oh,
of people will
receipts.
say, you see
Receipts.
it on receipts.
Well, it was the weirdest thing. I was shopping one day. Um, it was before we moved out here, and we were still kind of deciding, like, are we going to go to California? Are we not? And I was at the store grabbing some stuff, and I decided last minute to add this one cute little decorative plate to my, to the stuff I was getting at the store. And I took something out and I added the plate, and I looked at the receipt. I don't usually even look at my receipts. I just kind of, I looked at it, and it said 101.01, and I was like, you got to be kidding me! That's two 101s. Crazy.
A lot of people will find certain repetitive numbers end up kind of being their sign. A lot of times they're called angel numbers or spirit numbers. And there are like whole books and websites that you can go through to find the meaning of what these mean. It's like numerology, it's a whole pseudoscience of things.
Yeah.
Um, some really common ones are the repetitive numbers like 444 is indicative of like angel presence, right? 555, 111, 333, 888. Um, but then also repetitive combinations of numbers, like you see 101. And I think this is another one of those signs that is really indicative of spirit directing attention, right?
Hmm.
Like, look, here it is. Here's your number. You found it. Um, and I would say, some people. want to go look up what that meaning is. But maybe even more indicative is to look at how that shows up in your life and the patterns that you see when that's represented. Like with you, it could very well mean like this is a confirmation of what you're doing on your path, right?
That's how
This
it
is a
feels for me. That's
right.
what my
So look
intuition's
at that.
telling me. Yeah.
Look at how it's feeling to you. Look at what thoughts you're having. Look at what's going on in your life when you frequently see those things, right? So I have another friend who always sees 444, and it could be on a receipt, it could be on the URL that she's typing into the computer, it could be on a license plate. And whenever she sees that, it is her sign from her mother, that her mother is with her, that is watching over her. And she sees them all the time. And she directly related that to her mom, I think, because she, I think it was after her mom's funeral. She saw that on somebody's license plate and she just got the really strong notion that her mom was with her. And so she connected that every single time she sees it, she feels like her mom is giving her a nod, right?
Hmm.
So pay attention if you do see something repeated like that in some kind of format, pay attention to how it makes you feel. Pay attention to what's going on in your life and start putting together those pieces and see if you can draw a conclusion from that.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of, it's kind of a way that they give us messaging without having to um, really push us too hard to learn how to connect with them. It's just you see it, it makes you think of them, or you see it and you have a feeling like they're with you. And that's a really easy way for them to communicate and for us to feel like we're connected to each other.
Yeah.
So,
And why not?
yeah.
Why not just take it for what it is and allow it to be comforting the way it is?
Yeah, allow them to
So,
be in your life the way they want to show up for you. Like we don't want to feel like when someone passes away they're gone for good, you know. We want to feel close to them, and if we already have that belief that they exist on the other side, then why not open yourself up to have that continuous relationship? And if signs are the easiest way for that to be, and if you're not getting signs and you're like, why is everybody talking about all these amazing stories and I'm not having anything, you can just ask like Elle did and say, hey, I'd really love to have something show up for me. And then keep your eyes and your heart open. And when you think, and when you've got something that you feel like, oh my gosh, this is a sign, then you say thanks and you keep your eyes and heart open for more. And that's how it works.
right. And I have another friend who asked for the sign of Florida license plates.
Oh, yeah.
Um, that is how that sign came about for her, is she asked for that sign from her mother. And she lives in California. Her mother was from Florida, lived there her entire life. And yeah, she asked for it and she sees them, and whenever she sees them, she thinks of her mom. So um I would say don't discount what it is, right? Just kind of let it be if you can get comfort from that. And if it makes you feel good, it makes you feel like they're there. It's convenient for them to express their love for us in a way that we can recognize it.
And fun and creative. I know I've had spirits tell me as I'm in a session, like, I'm really good at giving clever signs. Like I make a point of it, you know. I love like sending these obvious signs. So it's they have fun. I think the creativity behind it. I've seen some amazingly
Mhm.
creative signs from my son where like leaves like were blowing on the ground and form the shape of a heart. That's pretty creative.
Yeah, I would say so. And pretty sneaky. Like, gotta
Yeah.
catch that at the right time, Mom.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being here with us. We're excited to share this episode with you, and we'll be back for more next week.
Yeah, and as always, if you have questions, if you have topics that you're interested in and that we haven't covered yet, or you'd like to hear more about, feel free to reach out to us. Our website is a great place to come in contact with us, which is
Throughtheveiledpodcast.com.
it's like your thing.
I
It's
mean,
like
it's just what I do.
it's your thing.
I'm like the
Um,
traffic girl on the radio station.
you can find our email, you can find our Facebook, you can find all the contact information with us on there. And if you want to reach out and schedule a session with either of us, or I have opened another round of my class coming up. It will be starting in August. If you have any interest in that, August through the beginning of October, reach out and let us know. As always, we would love any participation from
Yeah.
any of you.
And if you're interested in the class, don't wait until August to sign up because I know people are already filling spots right now. She just
Right.
announced it a few days ago, and there's already spots filled. So
Right.
get on
So,
it.
drop us an email if you get more information. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.